welcome everybody to this warm room, but very cozy. Today, the topic that we're going to discuss is a pretty important topic, which is decarbonizing transportation. And I'm really glad to have the panelists here today that are representing a couple of the more difficult segments in this transportation segment to decarbonize and abate. So before we dive into the discussion, we'll do a quick introduction round, and I'll go ahead and get started. So my name's Jennifer. I'm from InnoEnergy. We're one of the leading climate tech investors in Europe. We're mainly focused on scaling and commercializing hardware and technologies and businesses for sustainable energy topics. And I'm responsible for all the investments that we do in mobility globally on the topic of road transport, rail, and we have two rail companies, marine, and air. So really happy to be here with all of you. I'll hand it over now to Christian.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christian Vollmann. I'm the commercial co-founder of a startup called C1. And I teamed up with a team of chemists. Some of them are in the room here today. And they are computer simulating chemistry and have made an invention, which is a new way how to produce methanol. And we're going to use that new method, which is much more efficient than the old one, to produce methanol not from fossil sources anymore, as we've done so far, but from green sources. So either waste biomass in the short run and CO2 and green hydrogen in the long run. And now you ask yourself, what does that have to do with transport and logistics?
Wait. That's one of my questions.
Okay,
this is
sorry.
just the intro.
Okay, that was the intro. Thanks.
Okay. Let's go to Lorenzo.
Thanks. So my name is Lorenzo Radice. I work for the Italian railways, so like the BE, but in Italy it's called FS, Ferrovie dello Stato Italiane. And I'm head of the sustainability department for the group.
My name is Christian Höcker. I'm part of Deutsche Bahn Group, and I'm part of a program that we call Climate Neutral Deutsche Bahn. And I'm sort of representing like all those great people. Some of them are in the audience. It's a joint undertaking at Deutsche Bahn. It's an important, decarbonizing transport and logistics is important, but it's a huge challenge. So there are many people involved, and I'm happy to represent at least 100, 200, 300 people who are involved in that on a daily basis at Deutsche Bahn.
Okay, you can keep the mic. I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
And maybe start the discussion kind of at this 40,000 feet perspective, which is really looking at the goals and the targets that the different companies have set for being carbon neutral. So Deutsche Bahn, you have set this carbon neutral goal by 2040. And then you also have these interim plans to use 75% renewable energy in your offices, in your depots, in your stations by 2025. So maybe we can start the question to you with how's it going? And maybe what are the challenges that you're really trying to address right now?
Sure. So as I said, I focus on doing the homework, right, at Deutsche Bahn. So turning Deutsche Bahn carbon neutral, and we set very ambitious goals by, we want to be carbon neutral by 2040, possibly in all scopes, so scope 1, 2, 3 emissions. 2040, that's very ambitious, and there are major challenges we are facing. So, but before, looking into the future, I just want to quickly look into the past. So it's not only me, but there is a CDP rating, and Deutsche Bahn is actually in the top position of that CDP rating. So there are at least other people than me, saying that Deutsche Bahn is already doing a good job, or at least an okay job. So the CDP rating, which is a climate rating, important climate rating. So we've done good work in the past, right? And looking into the future, there are major challenges, right? We have about 20 million tons of CO2 equivalents that we need to get rid of in all scopes, probably a bit more. If you just look at Germany in scope 1, 2 emissions, so more direct emissions, we face 5 to 6 million tons CO2 equivalents, and that's huge, right? That's a lot of CO2 that we need to get rid of. And there are certain levers that we need to trigger, right, on the way to climate neutrality by 2040. And there are at least, like, let's say, 3 major building blocks we need to focus on, which is the technical building blocks, let's say technology, and there are technical gaps at the moment. We see it in freight transport, heavy-duty vehicles. There are no technical solutions at the moment. We see it in other parts at Deutsche Bahn. There are no technical solutions available. So there are technical building blocks that need to enable us really to achieve carbon neutrality by 2040, and that's a big challenge. That technology is not available, and then we need to, I think, do a bit of a better job when it comes to economics. So we really need to make sure that we focus our spending more on, let's say, green technologies. I think Deutsche Bahn could do a little better job. We're doing a great job already, but there's always room for improvement. And then I think the third building block is probably governance and management, top-level management, and sustainability and carbon neutrality everyone should be aware of this topic and really include it into the decision-making. And that's really another building block on the way to climate neutrality, where we at Deutsche Bahn already, we do a good job, but we can still do a better job, I think like any other company, really.
When I just look out at the audience now and combine that with what Christian just said, the first building block he said is that we need technology. And I think 95% of you in the audience are younger than me. So young, aspirational, hardworking individuals, startup entrepreneurs. So maybe somebody here gets inspired to help Deutsche Bahn work on that first technical block.
Well, I would be happy to talk to you if you have.
Okay. Let's move to another rail. So the Italian rail with Lorenzo. And I think this is quite interesting, actually, because your net zero targets were set for 2050. And then you decided to pull it forward and make it even more aggressive by doing it in 2040. And if I understood what we talked about correctly, what I understood is that 75% of the rail is already electrified. 90% of all the trips are electrified. And so maybe the question to you is, what's next on your journey toward getting to net zero?
Yeah, thanks. So many things have been already said by Christian, because we are doing more or less the same thing, so I will not repeat them. Maybe I will tell you something more and something different. First of all, I don't have any people from my company, which is not fair because all the others have. But beside that, of course, we are doing our homework, trying to reduce our own emissions the same way DB is doing. The scope is a bit smaller. We are something like half the emissions that DB has, but still are quite big. But we're also thinking about the decarbonization of the whole sector. So, and this is important. Of course, it's the same for DB, but he didn't speak about that. But in the transport weighs for something like 1/4 of the whole emissions in Italy, CO2 emissions, and also more or less in Europe. And the solution cannot be only the electric cars. We have seen here lots of electric cars, but probably that's not the right solution because, okay, it can be maybe carbon neutral, but there are other externalities, traffic, accidents, car accidents, the occupation of all the streets, the roads, all the space. So the solution has to be public transport, so buses, trains, and all we promote, all the way of moving we promote in FS and also in the Bay. So we are part of the solution in trying to take away people from their private cars and also freights from the road to the rails. That's our main goal. And of course, then we have to reduce our own emission, but they are less than 1% in Italy in whole. So first of all, we have to convince more people to use public transport. because in Italy, 80% of the people is using road cars, let's say, and for the freight is the same. And then, of course, we have to reduce our own. We moved we had this target at 2050. This target was set in 2019. Now, with the new industrial plan that was set, when was it, in March, we decided to put it, to anticipate it by 10 years. Also because we saw that the had it at 2040, we couldn't have it so late. So it's a good competition in this case. But we can do it by 2040, so that's what we're working on now.
Okay, speaking of getting people into a different modal shift, how many of you in the audience do not own a car?
Wow, that's
great.
This
is great.
In Italy, it would have been this.
And that
this
one,
number.
the camera should have been on the audience, just to cap that. This gives us hope, I think. Yeah. Okay.
In Italy, there are more cars than people, basically.
Yeah, we still have challenges to solve. All right, Christian, finally to you. So thank you for the intro on your company and what you're doing with methanol and making it more efficient, making sure that it can scale faster, making sure that it can be more flexible for use with renewables. And now the question I also wanted to ask was, where does this fit into transportation? And what kind of impact are we going to see from it?
Yeah, so there is two big use cases. One is as a feedstock for the chemical industry for carbon-based chemical products, but that is not the use case that is connected to transport. That is the second one, which is the container shipping industry, which has started to move in that direction. Especially Maersk, the biggest company in that space, driven by the fact that more than half of their top 200 customers have public net zero targets and are now, of course, also putting that pressure down their logistics and shipping providers. They've ordered 12 big container ships, so they downpaid 2 billion euros. The first of those is going to arrive in 2024. And this sends a very clear advanced buying signal into the market. So it's actually a great feat, and I congratulate Maersk on what they're doing, because that means everyone knows they're going to buy green methanol starting in 2024. It's known in what quantities. They also hinted at what green premium they are willing to pay. So now suppliers can start building up the capacity to actually be able to produce that volume in green methanol, right? Today, 100% of the methanol produced in the world is fossil. And so the challenge is now to switch the feedstock from gas or coal to a green feedstock, either waste biomass. There's different things you can tap into. It's either waste wood or black liquor from the paper making industry, or even sewage and things like that. So really waste biogenic carbon sources, turn that into green methanol, and the ship burns that as a fuel, releases the CO2, but that CO2 gets sucked out of the atmosphere via photosynthesis by plants, built into the biomass, and reuse waste biomass again. So it's a closed carbon circle, and we're moving from a linear consumption of fossils to a closed carbon circle in container shipping. And one more thing, it solves two emission problems in shipping, not only the CO2 problem, but also their SOx, NOx, particulate matter problem they have.
Maybe just, I want to keep moving around equally, but just to stay with you for one more minute, because I think this is actually an interesting topic, because when you look at the different transport modes, for example, road transport, the roadmap is pretty clear now, relatively speaking, on how we're going to decarbonize local emissions. And I think in rail, there's also some pretty clear roadmaps available, but I would say in the marine area, we're lacking a little bit of clarity on what's the technologies that will participate in marine. You know, is hydrogen participating? We have green methanol. Like, what are all the different technologies that are available? And then how does that actually hinder you guys to get long contracts? Because frankly, there's too much uncertainty in the ecosystem. So I wouldn't mind hearing like how you handle that, and if you think you can even influence it.
The market is so huge. We're talking about 3% of global CO2 emissions from container shipping alone. If the container shipping industry would switch 100% to green methanol today, the market for methanol would grow 6 times. So it would go from 100 million tons to 600 million tons. The scale is huge. The advantage of methanol is that it de-risks the switch because for several reasons. First, switching from a liquid fuel to another liquid fuel is much easier and also less costly than switching from liquid to gas. You can reuse the infrastructure in bunkering, logistics, etc. And those engines are dual use, so they can run on green methanol. They're supposed to run on green methanol, but they can also, if it's not available in a port where you went, not available yet, you can come back with ship diesel, conventional ship diesel. And of course, that makes the transition much less risky for them. We might end up that in the future it's a mix of technologies, but I'm not worried about that because, getting the quantity produced is going to be a huge challenge anyway.
This is actually maybe a good segue back to Christian number 1. So Christian, Deutsche Bahn, from what I understand, has 3,000 diesel rail vehicles that are using about 250 million tons of diesel a year. For this, you need to switch, right? And you need to switch to e-traction or battery electric. What do you see as possible to switch from those diesel to electric? Like what percentage, what number of vehicles do you think you can switch?
Sure. So I think before I give you a percentage and number, I think we need to add that it's about 3,000 rail vehicles, but we have another over 5,000 buses, over 20,000 vehicles on the road, so automotive. We have air freight, sea freight, transport. We have more than, I think, 30,000 railroads in Germany. We have, so it's a bunch of colorful flowers, I'd say, we need to take care of. And yeah, the 3,000 railway vehicles are important, but it's not the only CO2 emitter. Yeah, we have heating systems, right? Heating systems, thousands of heating systems that become outdated in the next couple of years. So there's a whole lot more to take care of. But if we look at, if we talk about the railway vehicles, the diesel engines, it's probably, due to electrification and battery, switch to batteries, we can probably get rid of maybe 50% of those diesel vehicles, diesel rail vehicles, and then there are more technologies that could play a role, and you really need to look what's the best option for your network, for your transport. So you have hydrogen, you have alternative fuels that play a major role at the moment at Deutsche Bahn, because there are no other technical solutions than this hydro-treated vegetable oil that we're using at the moment. There is, as I mentioned, hydrogen. We're also looking at hydrogen combustion at the moment for our work vehicles. So we really try to find other solutions for our diesel engines, but it's not straightforward and it's not easy, and there is a lot of work to be done. And yeah, probably just due to electrification and more electrification, we can probably get rid of 50% of those 3,000.
What's the lifetime on one of those diesel vehicles?
So it's a long lifetime, right? It's 30 years plus. I mean, depending on, if you look at freight transport or passenger transport, it's about 30 years. So it's a long lifetime.
If you wanted to switch to the 50% or so, is it available right now that you could procure that, and how are the lead times with making that switch?
Sure. So as I mentioned, let's pick cargo or freight transport. There are technical difficulties in the heavy-duty vehicles. We have our regional trains where the government plays a major role, right? I mean, if they want diesel engines, they get diesel engines pretty much. I mean, if they want hydrogen, they get hydrogen. But there's an infrastructure that needs to be built as well around those passenger transport. But so the government plays an important role. If you look at our work vehicles, there are technical difficulties, right? So we have like a fleet of maybe 700-800 work vehicles, and there are just simply not like technical solutions available, like to get rid of internal combustion engine, and that is a problem, right? As probably all of you know, like the EU is discussing, or I mean, is trying to make new internal combustion engines, get rid of new internal combustion engines by 2035. My understanding so far, it doesn't touch the rail vehicles. I mean, that's my understanding so far, but it might change, right? So we need technical solutions for all our problem segments, or our segments that are a problem right now. Yeah.
Maybe connected still with this topic, because Lorenzo, you mentioned at the start, with 75% of the rail already being electrified. What are your plans with producing green energy for those electrified rails?
We will electrify 2,000 more kilometers in the next 10 years.
Okay.
And then we want to produce in the next 10 years, this is in the strategic plan, which is a 10 years plan, 40% of the energy we will use. This is the plan. And the rest, we hope we will buy with green certificate. So far, this was not possible in Italy. I know in Germany it's possible, but the law didn't allow our network operator to buy green energy. But we managed to change this law, so hopefully we will manage, and I think we will make it. It's quite easy, I guess. We will manage to buy the whole energy we use, also for traction, for trains, green. Already the energy we use for our stations and our workshops, the electricity we use for our workshop and offices is almost all green. And then we have the same problem as the Bay with the vehicles, the diesel vehicles. And there we will use the same solutions, hydrogen, biofuels, and these kind of solutions we are testing. Batteries, hybrid vehicles, but for freight is a bit more difficult. But we still have some time, so I wouldn't be so worried because we have still some years.
Thank you. Coming back to Christian, I think what you mentioned earlier, maybe just to underline it again, because I think it's pretty impressive that you were able to secure this deal with Maersk for 10 ships and such a big contract volume with them. But obviously, in order to accelerate this and really do this transition, you probably have other challenges that you need to address in order to even realize and deliver everything that you need to deliver by the timeline and also accelerate it. So what would be the challenges? I mean, obviously you have the interest from the market, you have the interest from the off-takers, and we know that the whole market needs to head in this direction. So what are the other challenges then that you have to address in order to make this fly?
Yeah, just to clarify, Maersk didn't order the ships with us. We are not building ships, right? But
ordered your fuel for ships?
They ordered 12 ships with their shipbuilding company in Korea, I think.
To run with your...
And they gonna run on green methanol as a fuel.
Yes.
And now they are making contracts with suppliers of green methanol. And once those ships in operations, we want to be ready to be one of those suppliers.
Got you.
But we're not there yet. And that's also one of the challenges we have. So you have to understand, basically, if you know the concept of technology readiness level, it goes from 1 to 9. So 1 is an inventor has an idea, and 9 is the rocket lands on the moon, and you can build a second rocket that does the same thing again. So the invention was made on the computer. It's basically on the molecular level, a new chemical reaction that is totally disruptive to how the process works today. So today it's a heterogeneous catalysis, and we're taking it to a homogeneous catalysis. Now we're at technology readiness level 5, which means we're out of the lab. It's proven in lab. We're in the chemical park already. It works in the chemical park, but in a batch mode. So now the innovation is more on, we still have innovation on the chemistry side, but it now moves more to the engineering side, where it's about taking it and building the optimized continuous production process around it, so that the chemistry also has the perfect reactor design and the perfect chemical production process around it, and then take it further towards 9, and that's going to take us another 2 years, roughly 2 to 3 years, until we can then really start to scale it up and produce in bigger quantities. Yeah.
Just doing a quick time check. Is it 5 minutes? Because
we started 25 minutes ago, so we have 20 minutes left.
Okay, good. Thank you. So I think, Christian's the only entrepreneur on the stage. And I think we heard from both Italian Rail and Deutsche Bahn that there needs to be a lot of technology innovation. We need to keep coming up with new solutions here to think about this. And if you guys know as well as I do what's happening with transportation, we know that the amount of kilometers traveled by goods and by people is only expected to go up, right? So we even have estimates of 3 times. The amount of kilometers traveled today will be what those goods and people do, let's say, by 2050. So the question is, does our current infrastructure or our current designs of what we've built, are they sufficient to manage this extra movement that we're all predicting, and also at a higher efficiency rate? So I kind of have a provocative question, I guess, to both Lorenzo and Christian from Deutsche Bahn about, what's your openness to collaborate on solutions like the Hyperloop, for example, that could, be built in addition to rail, but to also complement the whole concept of, moving people and goods, but in kind of a different form. So how would you answer, like, your openness, your willingness to look
first?
At those?
Germany or Italy?
We start with you because you have the mic.
Good. So Hyperloop, we are monitoring it quite closely, but we think it's not mature enough yet. So I guess we will get something from the technologies coming out from Hyperloop, but I don't think we will use it. We don't foresee it for people, at least. I think for energy reasons, I think it will take a lot of energy to keep all this long tube with low pressure, and then maybe not everybody would be happy to be thrown at almost 1,000 kilometers per hour. So maybe for freight it would be easier to be used. But anyway, we are following it closely because there might be some technologies that we can use for something else. What we'll do is try to improve our network, reducing the time to go from A to B, and make it more comfortable to take more and more people. But we will not build completely new networks. We will implement what we already have.
So in addition to what Lorenzo just mentioned, I mean, so frankly speaking, I'm not sure if we're going to have a Hyperloop system in Europe soon. I mean, if you just look at the speed track from Berlin to Munich, which took Germany about 20 or 25 years to build, I mean, there is a huge challenge in building up or setting up this Hyperloop infrastructure across Europe. I mean, it would be sweet, it would be sexy to travel to, I don't know, Cologne, Dortmund in like 20 minutes or whatever, or 10 minutes. But, I mean, picking up on that Hyperloop idea, so what is Hyperloop about? It's about reducing resistance, right? Your drag coefficient, your rolling resistance. And I can, tell you that the rolling resistance for trains is an order of magnitude better than, buses or automotive. So we already have a system in place, the railway system, which is sort of sexy and efficient. I mean, it's just not in a vacuum tube, but the rolling resistance is much lower than if you look at automotives or buses. So it is a very efficient way to travel already, and
But
there
let's
is an
say
infrastructure.
we're not going to we're not going to replace rail.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to keep all the rail that we have. You guys are electrifying. We're using green energy. Everything's on a good way. But is it enough capacity to serve what we think will happen, or could it make sense to supplement? And if you were going to supplement, would you build rail, like in the traditional sense that you have so far, or would you consider adding on with some other technology?
So capacity, I mean, everyone probably knows is a problem in Germany. There are too many trains, freight transport, passenger transport on our railway system. I think one third of the entire system is like occupied with more than 100% or 125% of what's actually possible. So there are more trains on our tracks than are actually possible, and we're looking at, rather than like building a lot of new tracks, we're looking at like smart solutions, how to, let's say, navigate our trains using AI and data, pretty much, to just be smarter in how to run our trains across the network. But I mean, yeah, capacity is a problem, especially in Germany, because also, especially in Germany, you have high-speed trains, regional trains, and freight transport on the same tracks. That's different in other countries, in France, for example. So capacity will be a problem in Germany, but I'm not sure Hyperloop is going to be the solution, because, I mean, you need to set up a whole new infrastructure. I think if Hyperloop is coming, it'll take another 50, 100 years at least, or whatever. Yeah. We're better off improving our existing railway system, I think.
I would ask the audience here another question. All of you here, when you think about the next package that you would get delivered, would you pay €1 if you knew that this package was delivered net zero? Would you pay €1 more for your delivery? So if you would pay €1 more for your package delivery, if it was net zero from electrified trains and green methanol because it came on a net zero ship, raise your hand. Yeah, it's like the hands are more down on this one. But I think it's an interesting question, right? Like, as we transition toward net zero and we have to invest in new technologies, we have to then scale up the technologies, or maybe some additional cost as we kind of switch over. And where is all this cost going to sit? Is it going to sit with you guys? Is it going to sit? Where does it sit in the whole value chain? We all want this to happen. I mean, I think everyone who's even at this conference wants this to happen. But at the end of the day, who gets hit with the cost, and what's the willingness to pay? And so maybe I would come first to you, Christian, in what kind of your experiences on, are the customers willing to pay, or how do you see where the extra cost as we transition? I think a lot of this stuff can be even more affordable in the long term when things are scaled, but in this transition point, it might take some time.
Yeah. So I'm a studied business, right? So I'm from the economy side of things. I'm not a scientist. So what I can tell you from the economy side of things, that it doesn't work to ask people for their willingness to pay. They have to show it with real money. But I think we all agree, we would love to get our parcels delivered net zero. And what I can tell you is that when we look at the shipping part, I can share the numbers that Maersk has published in there and how they thought about it. So they founded the Center for Sustainable Shipping, invested 40 million euros, did research for 3 years, very intensive, and came up with, okay, we're going to start with green methanol. And they also looked at those questions, right? How much more is it going to be? And they looked into it, and of course, it's the percentage is higher for a commodity good, like let's say bananas or something like that, than for a ultra high value goods like a personal computer or a sneaker. But for example, the number for a sneaker is, and that's because, so what you have to understand is the shipping cost is only a very small percentage of the end user price of a product. So it's single digit percentage, very small percentage. And out of that shipping cost, in container shipping, only 20% of that cost is the fuel cost. So now if the fuel price increases, it has quite a small impact on the end consumer price in the store. In terms of the sneaker, they calculated a $100 sneaker would cost 6 cents more, so 0.06%.
I think we would have had more people raise their hand if I would have asked for 6 cents.
Yeah. With a banana, it would be 1 cent per banana, so that's 5% more. So percentage relative, that's more, but it's still, it's not that it's unpayable for. So I think it can be paid. And what you have to keep in mind, this is the green premium in the beginning, and it's going to come down over time as the technology matures and it scales up.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. I think before we close the round, does anybody in the audience have any questions? Because I think we got to go. Actually, maybe you just find the panelists or myself afterwards, because I think we need to wrap up. But thank you, Christian, Lorenzo, Christian. Thank all of you guys for being here today, and wish you a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.